I didn't think it would ever happen to someone so young. Yet here I sit beside an ICU bed, clutching the hand of another victim of attempted murder. It was only 2018 when Marvel Television closed down and was lowered into a cold grave. Just another senseless death, canceled despite a string of ongoing shows. In its place, Disney announced that Marvel Studios would take over and produce a new and ambitious slate. This new Marvel Entertainment was promised to be a more perfect version of Marvel Television. They would have blockbuster budgets, they would feature big-name actors, and they would tie into the films in dramatic ways. Fast forward to 2025, and something's gone horribly wrong.
Don't touch me right now. It's not all about you.
Reception to these new series has been mixed. Theatrical movies that incorporated heavy elements from the shows struggled at the box office. Ratings plummeted, with viewership dropping over time. The most recent show, Ironheart, received poor reception and continued the trend of mediocre viewing figures. While most damnably, Kevin Feige held interviews to announce that Disney Plus will be cutting back to maybe only one show a year and go back to being more isolated from the TV side. You know, that does sound kind of like old Marvel Television. I'm not going to be so bold as to call the Marvel shows dead overall. There are some projects, especially in the early days, worthy of praise. But there is no doubt that the current state of Marvel Television is on life support. But who put it there? What sadistic freak would massacre our poor boy? Well, in this case, we have a new twist. There's not a single murderer, no. This time, we have two killers, a potential double homicide. So let's dust off that Sherlock Holmes cap again and dive back into yet another cinematic murder mystery. Just like the other times, I have 6 suspects. Each is guilty in some form, but only 2 carry the bulk of the blame. Let's find out who would be Marvel Television's murderers. Suspect number 1, Jeff Loeb and Ike Perlmutter, old Marvel Television.
Why are you the way that you are? Honestly, every time I try to do something fun, you make it not that way. I hate so much about the things that you choose to be.
No one is ever really gone. And like a poltergeist, rising from the dead to haunt its murderer, the death of Marvel Television leaves clues leading to the killer. The original Marvel Television was headed by Jeff Loeb, a seasoned television producer who had a long history with superhero content on the small screen, having served as producer on both Smallville and Heroes. After the release of The Avengers as a smash hit in 2012, Loeb was tapped by Disney to expand the MCU brand onto the small screen with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. At first, Marvel Studios and Marvel Television, they worked together in harmony, with many characters from the movies appearing across the first 4 seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Agent Coulson returned as the series lead, with guest appearances from Nick Fury, Sif, Peggy Carter, Maria Hill, Jasper Sitwell, and more. It had tangible ties back to the wider universe and felt like a natural extension of the films. The initial reception to S.H.I.E.L.D. was mixed with the first season, as it spent a lot of its time finding itself. That all changed with a late season crossover with The Winter Soldier. Here, the series found its rhythm, and over the course of the next 5 seasons, it evolved into a confident series with a strong fan base. It wasn't long before the success of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. led to an expansion of the TV brand. Agent Carter received her own show on ABC, but the real creative boom happened over on Netflix. Netflix had just shifted into high gear with their production of original content. Disney Plus, it didn't exist yet, so partnering with an existing streaming platform, that was a big win for Marvel. Another happy relationship, one doomed to fall apart. Netflix would come out of the gate swinging. Daredevil released to instant universal critical acclaim. Where the MCU was typically seen as a brighter, more family-friendly franchise, Netflix would focus on the darker, more mature stories. R-rated adult content like Jessica Jones and S.A. Survivor, or bloody anti-heroes like The Punisher. It would feature villains like Kingpin, who cuts off heads in car doors, or Kilgrave, who does a lot worse. Like Daredevil, Jessica Jones and Luke Cage were met with acclaim, and while the Punisher series was met with a cooler response, most people did praise Jon Bernthal's take on the character. Netflix's goal here was to replicate the Avengers' success on the small screen by introducing street-level heroes in their own series and then bringing them all together for the Defenders. Unfortunately, Netflix, they sorta stumbled when sticking their landing. Despite the disappointment of the Defenders, there was a lot of love for these characters. I mean, not you, Iron Fist. The less said about that series, the better.
This one, the immortal Iron Fist living weapon, is still a thundering dumbass.
Okay, they weren't all winners. But most of this, for the most part, it sounds pretty great, right? So what went so wrong? Who killed the first iteration of Marvel Television? And did they strike again? It turned out that the relationship between Marvel Studios and Marvel Television was perhaps not as healthy as we had hoped. See, Jeff Loeb didn't actually answer to Kevin Feige. No, he still had to answer to Marvel Entertainment president Ike Perlmutter. And that's where our problems begin. See, Feige and Ike didn't really like one another all too much. Perlmutter was originally Kevin Feige's boss and would try to force projects on Marvel Studios, like the ill-fated Inhumans, the only movie from the Infinity Saga that never got made. He also regularly blocked Feige from such properties as Captain Marvel or Black Panther, claiming audiences didn't want to see black or female characters. Ouch, yeah. Both those movies, by the way, they made $1 billion if anyone was wondering. And they only got released because Feige eventually went over Perlmutter's head and went straight to Iger, altering their relationship so he reported directly to Iger instead. This effectively locked Perlmutter out of the MCU altogether. And oh boy, was he spitting mad.
What? You went over my helmet?
He tried to take his revenge by tightening his grip on the TV division. He raised his fist and said, "I'll show you, Feige." And then he proceeded to produce a television version of the Inhumans, and it's one of the worst things I've ever witnessed. I have no idea where the budget went on this thing. Despite living on the moon, most of it takes place in Hawaii, and almost all the main characters' powers are incapacitated in the first episode to save on VFX. But the worst part of it, and I don't know how this got past, just workshopping, our protagonists are a bunch of rich dictators trying to uphold a brutal slave class system, while the villain is trying to, end that? Oh no. Why am I rooting for them again? Anyways, this thing was a nightmare. As this relationship degraded, Feige took it out on Marvel Television by completely shutting off the tap to the film characters. No more crossovers for Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., no inside knowledge on upcoming events. This created massive continuity errors through the 6th and 7th seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., with no acknowledgement of Thanos or the 5-year snap. Netflix, meanwhile, was left referencing their inciting incident of the Battle of New York and basically, nothing else. When mentioning any film character, they skirted around names, calling them the flag waver or the big green guy. It no longer felt all kind of like seamlessly joined together. Even the newer shows like Runaway or Cloak and Dagger or Hellstrom. Does anyone actually remember Hellstrom? Yeah, anyways, they all felt like the MCU in name only. With the birth of Disney+, Feige finally had the leverage to take over the rebellious corner of the MCU and rip it from Perlmutter's clutches. Marvel Studios would completely absorb the TV division and bury it for good. So if old Marvel Television was the killer, it was by being the first domino to fall. It started a chain reaction that catastrophically toppled each new domino Feige tried to set up. It became his own Ghost of Christmas Past. Everything Marvel Studios tried to make would be compared back to that content that came before. Despite a hit-or-miss reputation, much of Marvel Television's offerings were loved by fans, from S.H.I.E.L.D. to Agent Carter to Daredevil and the first season of Jessica Jones, which I personally consider one of the best superhero seasons ever made. There were some big shoes to fill, and perhaps Bob Chapek and Feige were a little too confident in their ability to do so. Bringing us to suspect number 2, Bob Chapek and Disney+.
The guys at Spectrum think I'm just some dumb hick. They said that to me at a dinner. I'm done. Do what you want. Pull the plug. I'll kill you.
The pandemic hit the United States in late 2019. And for Disney, they thought they couldn't have timed it any better. Theaters were closing, but they had gotten their streaming service up just in time. Little did they know, but Disney Plus would become the bane of their entire business model. Theaters were expensive. Why pay $50 to take your whole family to the movies when you can wait just 2 months and watch it for just the cost of one subscription? Though Bob Iger would oversee the launch of Disney Plus and set the streaming-first business model, Iger would step down as CEO of Disney in 2020 and name Chapek as his successor. It was Chapek who would become responsible for turning the platform profitable. He would completely and catastrophically fail to rise to the challenge. When Bob Chapek took over, he had one directive for Marvel Studios: content, content, and more content. In order to keep subscribers on the platform, this meant taking Pumps and attaching it to their two big cash cows, Marvel and Star Wars. Chapek hoped that he would create more enthusiasm for both these franchises.
CEO Bob Chapek saying they're ramping up content spending to hit those targets with as much as an additional $1 billion in costs.
It's a hungry beast to feed, the direct-to-consumer platforms, but our consumers really love it, and it's a good investment for us and it's a good investment for our shareholders.
At first, there was a lot of excitement and enthusiasm for this new TV slate. A show featuring Loki? Sign me up. A big budget Falcon and Winter Soldier? Hell yeah. let's go. Hawkeye? Finally, he gets his chance to shine. Bring it on. And there were surprises like WandaVision, a show no one asked for but ended up being some of their best content on the entire platform. This was not a complete failure from inception. The problem was the audience thought they'd signed up for a nice breezy 5K and suddenly found themselves stuck in an ultra marathon. It never ended. Content was constantly coming out. It used to be the MCU felt regular, but still special. In 2022, Marvel Studios ballooned from making 2 to 3 movies every year to making 4 movies and sometimes 4 to 5 series. It was completely unsustainable. For example, in 2019, you only had to watch about 7 hours a year of MCU content. That's all that came out. But by 2021, that had expanded to about 34 hours. How is anyone supposed to keep up with this stuff? Watching felt like homework. Now, maybe this wouldn't have been a problem had the Disney Plus series been more consistent in quality. Instead, they'd become just as hit and miss as the old Marvel television, arguably more so. Now, it's hard to say why Marvel Television didn't have this same effect. It's perhaps because they were more isolated from the main events, so they felt more like optional viewing. They got less credit when they hit, but they also got less ire when they missed. Marvel got into the public's good graces by being known for its consistency and quality. The films had a reputation for usually being pretty good and fine at worst. With Disney Plus, Marvel Studios was batting more 50-50 at best. This wild fluctuation in quality caused a lot of people to start skipping their content. Where before the entire cinematic universe was built on making people feel like they had to see every single thing, Disney Plus instead taught them that maybe they didn't need to suffer through the mediocre material. That it maybe just wasn't worth it.
Yeah, come at me, bro!
And that's not me saying it either. That's returning CEO Bob Iger, who had to be brought back in to clean up the mess. Yes, Chapek had created a bit of a mess of things. It wasn't just putting Kevin Feige on the hot seat. He was also busy angering many other MCU heavy hitters, such as Scarlett Johansson, when he decided to put her multi-million-dollar star vehicle, Black Widow, straight to Disney Plus. As a result, Black Widow would, predictably, become one of the lowest-grossing movies of the entire franchise, and Johansson would miss out on most of her bonuses. When she called out Chapek and Disney for this, they responded by accusing her of using the pandemic for her own financial gain. This led to a long, drawn-out lawsuit, just lighting a match and torching that relationship. Kevin Feige was reportedly embarrassed by Disney's entire response to the situation. Chapek would ultimately be removed due to over $1.5 billion in losses on Disney Plus, causing Disney's stock to fall to a 2-year low, and ultimately the return of Iger to the driver's seat. He would say in a call with investors, "We know that in our zeal to flood our streaming platform with more content, we turned to our creative engines, including Marvel, and had them produce more and more. We have learned that quantity does not beget quality, and frankly, we've all admitted we lost a little focus by making too much." Well, that is good to hear. I suppose the first step in recovery is admitting your mistakes. Bob Chapek would ultimately end his short run as CEO in 2022, but his decisions would be long-lasting. The last show made under his supervision was Ironheart, and that only released just this year. He was gone, not forgotten. Disney Plus put extreme pressure on Marvel Studios to produce more content, and without the old Marvel television, it put extreme strain on the studio to meet those demands. More scripts to approve, more projects to oversee, more releases every year. It would be a lot for any single studio. And it certainly was too much for a certain micromanaging producer. Suspect number 3, Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios.
Hello, Jennifer.
Kevin? So
And
you're the one who's making all the decisions here?
I will answer your questions, but you must first transform back to Jennifer. You are very expensive.
So we come to the kingpin of the MCU.
That I am the ill intent who set upon the traveler on a road that he should not have been on.
No, I'm talking about the real kingpin. He is the head of the studio, the architect, the one to steer the MCU into becoming the most successful franchise of film history, and the one that just may bury it.
I brought you in this world, and I'll take you out.
Certainly no one is more responsible for the current condition of the MCU shows than Kevin Feige. It would be so easy to shift blame and say it's all on Bob Chapek for forcing more content on Disney Plus. But at some point, you have to say the buck stops here. And Feige made some critical miscalculations. The first would be killing old Marvel television. Yes, he did it. It's no secret. As they say, if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. But unfortunately, the glove here is quite snug. I don't think it ever sat right with Feige that there were aspects of the MCU outside his control. Feige may be one of, if not the most hands-on producer since Walt Disney himself. Yeah, he's giving directors a measure of freedom in their projects, but always reins it into some grand design. Feige had a good reason to be confident coming off Avengers Endgame. It was the highest-grossing film of all time at release. Anyone would be feeling invincible. Unfortunately, Feige is a movie producer, not television. These are very different mediums. They have been produced differently over 70 years for a reason. Feige's most critical error is in thinking he could run television just like he ran film. As said by Dave Gonzalez, who was the writer for MCU, Reign of Marvel Studios, Marvel remade how they made franchise movies, and they thought they could do the same thing with television. You can't. They thought they were more nimble than they really were. Feige did away with classic television production roles and structure. New titles were given that more reflected movie counterparts, and other classic TV roles replaced with film-friendly lingo. But television is not movies. Television is long-form storytelling with episodic production, sometimes stretching nearly a full year back. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. used to run 22 episodes over an entire year, and again, that was annually, every single year. Nowadays, we're lucky to get 8 episodes with about 2 to 3 years between each season. Shows are built to be episodic in structure, even serialized formats like Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad. They are built so each episode is self-contained, a structure of rising and falling action to make each a satisfying weekly viewing experience. Marvel shows under Feige became low-budget 3-hour-long movies chopped up into 6 pieces. Like I said in a previous video, it's like someone had a remote, turned off a movie midway through, and just said, "Oh, wait until you see the next part. It's gonna be great." But this is not satisfying television. Feige didn't know this because he was kind of alien to television. Perhaps if Disney Plus had replicated the Netflix model and released all the episodes at once, this strategy could have worked out. But Chapek was on a mission to keep people on the platform, and these weekly releases highlighted the unsatisfying experience. Even if you go back to Netflix's show and how they did full episodes released at once, even if you watched an individual episode, it still felt satisfying and like a full experience on its own. The Disney Plus shows never felt like that. These were shows that were actually elevated by not watching them as they were released, and instead waiting until they were completed seasons for a better full viewing experience. Only really WandaVision and Loki embraced their medium with more episodic structure, and that's thanks mostly to the experienced showrunners Jack Schaefer and Rick and Morty's writer Michael Waldron, 2 people who clearly had an understanding of how television works. Loeb, say what you want, despite his more hit-and-miss reputation, had a long and successful career on the small screen. It is one of the reasons why, despite his misses, when he got a hit, he really hit. He knew what made good TV. Feige was stumbling through the dark, trying to learn on the fly while keeping his movie side alive and functioning. In the end, he couldn't manage it. Just recently, he surrendered back to traditional television norms, fought to cut down on television production, and in the end is making the decision to concentrate on the films again and isolate TV. As reported by Deadline, Feige disclosed that Marvel TV shows would have less connection with the MCU movies going forward and focus on only one TV show a year. Even directly referenced Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and S.H.I.E.L.D. for how they connected back in the old days, and they were going to start looking to do something similar. So, welcome to the new strategy, same as the old strategy. If that's not a white flag, I don't know what is. And yeah, you could look at this as a man surrendering to his failures, or you can look at it as more a glass half full of a man admitting what didn't work and he's trying to course correct. Only time will tell which is which.
And with Disney Plus, we're able to extend this way of storytelling to a new format, creating series that are connected to our theatrical releases, making the MCU more immersive than ever.
One of Feige's big promises for Disney Plus would be more connectivity, and that promise quickly fell through the cracks. They promised that these shows would be more linked to the movies with Marvel Studios in charge, but it was as imperfect as ever. WandaVision had this great arc on how the inability to process grief in a healthy way, it can turn you into a villain. And by the end, Wanda has to learn to let both Vision and her fake-constructed life go. Unfortunately, Doctor Strange 2 completely regresses her character arc, and she's back to trying to make a fake family and has to relearn to let her fake children go. Again. It felt like 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Same with our new Captain America, who also completely repeats his arc. In his series, Sam is trying to figure out what it means to take up the mantle of Captain America, and is trying to live up to the expectations of Steve Rogers. And in his movie, he's doing the exact same thing. You've also got cases where the shows just lack overall follow-up. Miss Marvel is about a kid who's just a diehard fan of Captain Marvel and idolizes her. But the Marvels movie does absolutely nothing interesting with this relationship when these two characters finally meet. Is there any commentary on how you should not meet your heroes, or how people rarely live up to being idolized? No, they just have a relationship that's best described as, I guess, friendly? Nick Fury appears in Secret Invasion as this more brooding, traumatized character, only to appear later that year in the Marvels and not mention anything that happened to him, and he's so happy and go lucky that it makes you question if Samuel L. Jackson is a Skrull.
Come on, use your core. Hey, Black Girl Magic.
With exception to WandaVision, Loki, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and Miss Marvel, pretty much the early shows, all the other stuff has been pretty much ignored. Kate Bishop shows up for one short after credit scene and that's it. Hawkeye has been a no-show, largely due to Jeremy Renner's unfortunate real-life accident. Moon Knight ended on a cliffhanger to the detriment of the entire season, and it may never resolve it as the show came out in 2022 and there is still no season 2 in sight. There was some She-Hulk concept art that leaked for Secret Wars, but otherwise, Marvel seems happy to sweep her show under the rug. There is no sign we will ever see her, Echo, or Ironheart ever again. And Agatha, she's unlikely to ever leave the comfy confines of the small screen. This is not the great connective tapestry that we were promised.
See you on the big screen.
Really?
No.
Suspect number 4, She-Hulk and Secret Invasion.
Almost tasted that. Num 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 num, eat it up. Go play okay, 3, 2, 1. You know I'm the hottest.
It is hard to pinpoint where feelings started to turn against the Marvel brand on Disney+. You could say it was with the scattershot nature of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, but that was still solidly received, and sandwiched between the critically lauded WandaVision and Loki. You could say it was with the dud ending of Moon Knight. Sure, the overall series lacked action, but the rest of the show was pretty good up until it just cuts to black at the climax. You could say it was with the steadily diminishing returns of Miss Marvel, as that show started strong and kind of petered out as it went along. Yet there was still a lot of enthusiasm for the series' lead. No, I would say that the two shows that likely did the most damage to the MCU brand would be Jessica Gau's She-Hulk and Secret Invasion. These two shows came out back to back and effectively took Marvel's reputation for quality and lit it on fire. First off, She-Hulk was ridiculed long before it even made it to Disney+. The trailers showed off some truly horrific and uncanny valley CGI. For a show that cost near $200 million, it was a laughingstock of the internet. Which blows my mind. Her show is basically a workplace comedy. It's not even really an action adventure. It's like if The Office cost $200 million for some ungodly reason. The comedy proved widely divisive. Some liked it, and others, such as myself, felt like it was almost ghost-written by the same team that made the terrible Velma series. I'd say the jokes were very much in the same vein.
You cheat off me in Spanish because you think I'm Mexican.
Maybe. I have a disease where I can't recognize people who aren't hot.
There's a hot chick over there. I'm gonna go talk to it.
Others found the comedy particularly mean-spirited and a shallow take on gender roles within modern workplace environments, effectively a surface-level straw man, a topical subject, but the show had little of actual substance to say. The main character also proved just as divisive, as some liked her free-spirited, take-no-prisoner attitude and fourth-wall-breaking energy. Others found her grating and a wannabe Deadpool without any of Ryan Reynolds' charm, and the main actress just buried under ghastly CGI. This was all framed around a bad attitude, as she minimalizes her cousin's experiences.
I'm great at controlling my anger. When I'm catcalled in the street, I'm an expert at controlling my anger because I do it infinitely more than you.
In case you needed to kill me, but you can't. I know, I tried. I got low. I didn't see an end, so I put a bullet in my mouth, and the other guy spit it out.
And I'm sorry that I said a bunch of harsh but very true things.
Wow, an apology that still doubles down on a thing you're apologizing for.
And despite coming into her power with little conflict, she still spends a lot of time whining and bemoaning how she can't get ahead in life.
Okay, this sucks. I am totally qualified, but now everyone around here is always going to think this is the only reason I got the job. It's so unfair.
Most of her injuries are fairly self-inflicted. Behind the scenes, the show was even more of a mess. Jessica Gao would subtly hint at her dissatisfaction with the production and would often butt heads with Kevin Feige. She found that Marvel Studios wouldn't let her go as far as she wanted. For some, that may be for the better, and others, for the far worse. She would cite her intentions behind the show as being to troll incel culture, or the toxic male Marvel audience. Now, some might question the wisdom of actively trying to piss off your fan base, but this is also a comedy, so if you can't ruffle a few feathers here, where can you? Well, I guess it worked. A whole lot of the internet happily took the bait. and I'm just still unsure what the purpose of it served and what value was really provided. The entire show would be put through the meat grinder in post, ripped to shreds, and restitched together to try and get it to be somewhat watchable. The origin story was originally meant to be this flashback, and instead it would be repurposed as the first episode. This created continuity ripples across the entire production. The main villain would show up in one scene with seemingly no powers and then have powers in the next, as seen when she attacks the courtroom in the first episode, but then is free as a bird making commercials with bad ADR to just kind of hand wave it away. The entire ending was also reshot. As it turns out, Gao didn't like the plot lines she herself wrote.
We're not actually doing this.
This can't possibly be where the season was going. This is a mess. None of these storylines make any sense.
With an ending that basically said, I don't know, it was all just a dream, or it was cliche and stupid, so it doesn't matter anymore. We're gonna use a fourth wall and just rewrite it all, okay? Who cares? And yeah, that's about my feelings. Who cares? Why should I care about anything if nothing matters? Did they think this would be funny? It just makes for an unsatisfying ending, and it makes the entire show, everything you watched, feel pointless, complete with one of the dumbest villains ever brought to screen, and capping it off with one of the dumbest cliffhangers. And oh boy, has that teaser been ignored. Everything in this show has been ignored. Daredevil actor Charlie Cox seemed exceptionally unhappy with his role in the show, and both he and his showrunner on Born Again have expressly said they are basically ignoring that it ever happened. It seems no one else is in a rush to bring back the main character or address the arrival of Hulk's back-to-earth and horrifying CGI son. In a sense, the show is treating every character and the MCU as a whole as a farce. That is completely in contrast to a character like Deadpool, who has been able to carefully balance on the tightrope between outright absurdity and still having a story with stakes set within a continuity. With She-Hulk, the collective viewing public basically said, no thank you. I'm not saying that it doesn't have its defenders, but for the most part, She-Hulk split the fan base like no other Marvel property before it. And if you think the rejection of She-Hulk by large swaths of the general audience is bad, it's nothing compared to Secret Invasion. Marketed as yet another property trying to tap into the tone of Winter Soldier, Secret Invasion was brought to screen by Mr. Robot veteran Kyle Bradstreet, and meant to be an espionage thriller featuring Nick Fury returning to Earth to deal with an invasion of the shape-shifting Skrulls. It has the makings of a good concept, but it is based on a beloved comic that is way too big for the small screen, and likely would have been better served as the plotline for an Avengers movie. It turned out that behind the scenes of Secret Invasion was also a mess. I know, you're shocked. Mr. Robot's Kyle Bradstreet was removed as head writer after working on the project for over a year. The director then, Ali Salem, he took on a much more hands-on approach to the story. This was uncommon in television, as directors typically follow the lead of showrunners. But the problem was, there was no showrunner. So what are you going to do? By the time you got halfway through pre-production and production, most of the team had been replaced. Like many of the early Marvel shows, Secret Invasion feels less like a show and more a bloated 3-hour movie. And it's a movie with not a whole lot going on. Secret Invasion is contrived, lazy, but worst of all, it feels disrespectful to the legacy characters. Maria Hill was fridged, fan favorite Talos was killed off later in the season, War Machine was revealed to be a Skrull for who knows how long, and Nick Fury became a bumbling shadow of his former self, who is now married to a Skrull somehow, and is kind of inept.
I'm Nick Fury. Even when I'm out, I'm in.
The series ends with a side character named Gaia getting insane powers of basically all the other heroes, including Drax's arm for some reason, and then defeating the villain at the end while Fury just sits it all out. This was the second show in a row to feature the dreaded Deus Ex Machina. For the record, Deus Ex Machina means God from the machine. It is an old term from Greek plays, when a god would come down out of nowhere and solve all the story's problems. We can see it as a narrative device in She-Hulk, where she breaks the fourth wall to meet a robot named Kevin. Get it? Do you get it? He then solves everything by rewriting the ending, so a bunch of stuff in the series never even happened.
Jen, I'm here to help.
Hey, Daredevil. You missed it. We're done. Sorry.
Everything? Oh, man.
It was great, though.
We see it here in Secret Invasion when the side character Gaia gets so powerful, all obstacles become an inconvenience, and she solves nearly everything for the main protagonist. This is another show Marvel seems happy to sweep under the rug. They have not followed up on the Skrulls on Earth, they've ignored everything that happened to Fury. When he shows up in the Marvels, it's almost like nothing even happened. And it ignores the ramifications of a Skrull roadie. almost as if they're happy to completely forget about it. Again.
How long have you been in here?
The creators were quick to blame the fans for the poor rejection. The director of the episodes shot out a tweet calling the MCU fans rabid and that it's not their job to meet audience expectations. Well, alright then, I guess. Invasion, much like She-Hulk, had to undergo extensive reshoots and re-editing to get it to a state of even being watchable. It became an espionage film with characters bumbling their way through figuring out each other's nonsense plans. Fans weren't exactly thrilled to be blamed for the creative failings. These shows marked a strange turning point in the public eye, a complete disregard for storytelling quality. Even worse, Marvel was built on its strength of characters, and both She-Hulk and Secret Invasion were accused of basically character assassination for beloved MCU mainstays. It was showing that Marvel was losing touch with its ability to create characters that connected to a wider audience.
Maybe nobody likes you.
You're a dick. Maybe nobody likes you, huh?
Netflix had a brilliant strategy for bringing characters to the living room. Pick characters that are cheap. Don't expect a blockbuster budget. A blind ninja, a dude with bulletproof skin, and a martial artist, these were all great picks. They made shows that looked great on a budget and fit the long-form storytelling of television. Disney Plus, on the other hand, had no need for such restraint. They don't need to worry about money. Open up the Scrooge McDuck money vault and just let the cash flow. WandaVision featured 2 characters with VFX-heavy powers, including a climax where they both are fully replaced by CGI models. Luckily, this is offset by showrunner Jack Schaefer and Mark Shackman cleverly making the show a series of bottled period pieces. Still not completely what I'd call cheap, but you still have at least a couple episodes where you can levitate objects using string. The rest of the MCU attempts were massive budgets, which is comparable to the films, but nowhere near the same revenue stream. Falcon and the Winter Soldier required entire flying sequences. She-Hulk had a main character who was entirely CGI. Loki had expensive big-name stars. Ms. Marvel's stretchy powers were so hard that they gave up and just made her Green Lantern. And even something like Moon Knight, they made it difficult on themselves for literally no reason. I don't understand it. In the comics, this character is a more street-level hero in the vein of Batman. Here, they turn him into this mythological figure with a magic costume doing battle with kaiju gods. Why? Why, okay? None of these are really great for the small screen, except for one, and that's the reasonably budgeted Agatha All Along. The result is that you get a series where the heroes rarely use their powers. Sam is left without his wings for large swaths of the series, Ironheart is barely in her suit for more than 2 minutes at a time, and Moon Knight shows up for a grand total of, I think, like 3 or 4 times across 6 episodes. Or you can get characters where they look like eye-gouging CGI monstrosities out of a PS2 game, like She-Hulk. Or you can just, not bother to give them their powers at all, such as in Ms. Marvel. And this one really hurts, because in the comics, Ms. Marvel is meant to be a reflection of young girls' insecurities with their changing bodies when coming of age, reflected in her embiggening powers. And for me, Ms. Marvel remains one of the most frustrating because it had so much potential there. Even though they changed her powers, they still had a great Scott Pilgrim style, but they dropped it after the first 2 episodes. However, without having access to Spider-Man for TV, they could have turned her into a fun street-level hero who's coming of age and trying to balance being a normal kid with being a hero. Perfect for television, just a great setup for that. Instead, they ship her off on another boring global adventure with nonsense multiverse villains and less stakes than if they just had her stay home. At the beginning, Marvel didn't do too bad with picking pre-established characters from their movies, even though that cost them an arm and a leg. At least it generated some interest. But later, they were picking characters outside their scope or budget, like Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel. Then they leaned in on characters where there was really zero interest or enthusiasm behind them. Was anyone honestly asking for an Echo, Agatha, or Ironheart series? That is not to say you can't take an unknown character and turn them into a favorite. The films were fantastic at this. Ms. Marvel is easily the most likable of the new bunch, with an infectious enthusiasm. Kate Bishop is also a win, just by being played by the charismatic Haley Steinfeld. John Walker was also an interesting addition as a character with a bit more complexity, but the rest of the characters are fairly humdrum or have other complications related to them. Echo was locked in this instantly forgettable story and then given head-scratching powers. I'm still confused what her powers are. I still don't understand them, okay? Someone explain them to me in the comments down below, all right? Do me that favor. Like and subscribe while you're down there too, I guess.
What did you do?
Despite having a talented actress in Tatiana Maslany, She-Hulk remains a highly divisive collection of ones and zeros. As for Moon Knight, Oscar Isaac absolutely killed it. He brilliantly brought multiple distinct personalities to the screen. But again, Isaac was not contracted for anything outside that first season. And who knows if we will ever see a conclusion for that cliffhanger ending. Kathryn Hahn was great in the role of Agatha, but the character is so niche that even the most hardened fan passed up the series. As undeservingly as I think that may be, because I do think this is one of the MCU's few hidden gems. Yet the biggest culprit here has to be Ironheart. Riri was a character who was not really well liked in the comics either, but here she is a masterclass in how to build an unlikable protagonist.
Don't laugh at me!
Now, I'm not trying to make the claim here that Ironheart, all on its lonesome, managed to put the knife in Marvel Television. It never really made enough of an impact to do that. No, I'm here to make the claim that Ironheart is a microcosm of everything that went wrong with Marvel Studios' attempts on Disney+. It is also the last pitiful gasp of the TV slate originally outlined by Bob Chapek and Kevin Feige. Ironheart was being set up way before the show even went into production. She was forced into the plot of Ryan Coogler's Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, mostly used as this plot device to kickstart tensions between Wakanda and Atlantis, rather than this fully formed character. And it's no mystery why Riri was being pushed so hard by Marvel. With Endgame wrapped up, Robert Downey Jr. had closed out his time as Tony Stark, and Marvel was already on the hunt for a worthwhile replacement. This was a common trend across the Marvel shows. Many of their actors were aging out of their roles, dead within their current continuity, or at the end of their contracts. But the big question was, who would be the new Iron Man? Would it be the talented Don Cheadle, finally taking center stage in an Armor Wars show? No, that had been canceled or turned into some sort of film stuck in development hell. Instead, Marvel gambled everything on a lesser-known character with a questionable reputation. Her introduction in The Invincible Iron Man in 2016 was met with almost as much hostility as her live-action counterpart, because in that one she was actually replacing the role of Iron Man. She had some rehabilitation and redemption in team-ups like Champions, but otherwise was largely disliked and kind of pushed to the back shelf and forgotten. It is then a confounding decision to adapt such a dislikable character to begin with, but the writers seem to be set on making her more off-putting than her comic counterpart. She has a full ride to MIT and squanders it by engaging in plagiarism.
You're expelling me?
Refuses to get a new job like she's above it. Creates an AI version of her dead friend without her family's permission.
You had no right to use Natalie as one of your little tech toys, Ree.
She is alive. Sort of.
That is not my sister. She's not sort of alive.
Wow, okay.
Joins a gang for no other reason than getting money, indirectly murders a fellow gang member, then turns on the group when she fears they're going to find out. She treats her mom like crap.
One co-worker dead, another arrested for domestic terrorism. That's fine to you.
I am not you, and you actually can't take that.
She blackmails a dude for equipment, then gets him thrown in prison for her crimes.
Looks like they got your favorite color. Khaki.
She even destroys her father's beloved car to make a new suit, right after her mother worked so hard to buy it back for her. And hold up a minute. Why did she have to do all that crime when she could have just built a perfectly good suit with a used car and a box of scraps? I guess she didn't need billions like Tony Stark after all. Just like 50 grand in a car. Anyways, the series ends with her selling her soul to the literal devil. Now hey, as they say, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. But you don't get to whine about doing the time when you did the crime. No one likes a whiner. Especially when at no point does Riri ever come to a moment of self-awareness.
So do you think I'm a good person? Never mind.
I've also heard defenses that this is the first part of her arc. First off, it's not going to get a second season. So if the plan was to make her learn from these mistakes in season 2, it's never gonna happen. And she will be left forever in character limbo, where she learns nothing and continues to be dislikable and make terrible choices. And secondly, I'm not sure if redeeming her was even the plan. The big problem here is with intention. Tony Stark works because despite his flaws, he had natural charisma. He was a bad person, but he also got a dose of reality about 20 minutes into his own movie. By the end of one season, nearly 4 hours, reality still hasn't whacked Riri on the head. The intention with Tony Stark is clear. He starts as a bad person and slowly becomes someone we can like and root for as he changes over that one movie. Same with Ant-Man and Doctor Strange. We can root for someone picking themselves up, dusting off their pants, and trying again to do better. I'm not sure Ironheart ever learns a single thing in her entire series. Her choices keep going from bad to worse. You could say, okay then, Ironheart is meant to be a tragic figure, an analogy for when youth falls in with gang culture, and it is a negative character arc. Okay, but in order to do that, you have to first get the audience to engage positively with the character and then transition into the negative. We never understand Riri's values, and so we never are able to connect with her or her choices. Breaking Bad works because even though we're watching a person becoming a worse version of himself, we are with him at the beginning because we understand he's all doing this because he's dying from cancer and wants to support his family. What does Riri really want? We never really know because she keeps giving different reasons. She wants to make something iconic. She wants to make a suit around the world. Yeah, that worked really great in Ultron. She wants to make something better than Tony Stark and prove she's better. Or she wants respect, or my personal favorite, just because she can. She gives a lot of reasons, and because of that, it all starts to feel like it's just BS.
That's a hot pile of garbage. Trash, and you know it.
And the last defense I've heard is she's no different from Peter Parker, who also constantly made problems across his trilogy with bad choices. But again, we understood the intentions here, both from the writers and the character. By the end of the movie, Peter usually learns something. And even when he messes up, we can see his good intentions behind all his actions. Peter Parker also, I can't imagine that he would have left a man to die as he slowly suffocated and begged for mercy.
Open the door! Open the door! Okay.
You deserve that. You're a criminal. Bye, Mr. Criminal.
Riri's choices are more head-scratching. At one point, one of her other claims is she wants to make a suit so she can be a better hero. This is all started when her stepfather and best friend are killed in a drive-by gang shooting. So let me just get this straight here, okay? You're wanting to become a gang member in order to become a hero. Now, that sounds a little oxymoronic. This would be like if you had Uncle Ben be shot by a burglar and Spider-Man decided, you know what? I'm gonna become a burglar now so I can have enough money to be a hero. Do you not see how that's asinine, okay?
I'm gonna put some dirt in your eye.
Riri is a character perpetually moving from negative beats to negative scenes all the way up to negative acts and then finally a negative conclusion, all with motivation we don't fully understand. Is she supposed to be like Walter White, where we root for him at the beginning and then against him when he crosses some line? Is she supposed to be like Oceans from Ocean's 11, and despite her criminal ways, we root for her anyways? Is she supposed to be like Jordan Belfont from Wolf of Wall Street, and we never root for her? We're always rooting against her. Who knows? I certainly don't.
You're just a selfish kid who can't take any responsibility for herself. You lie. You cheat, you manipulate, you'll do anything you can to save yourself, even if that means hurting other people in the process.
And Ironheart was dead before it even came out. It was a sacrificial lamb at the altar. The show was originally announced all the way back in 2020 and scheduled for a release in 2023, only a year after her debut in 2022's Wakanda Forever. Instead, the show would be delayed to 2024, then again to 2025. The show was pushed so far back that the what-if versions of the characters from Ironheart would appear in the animated series before the audience ever saw them in live action. The show started filming in May of 2022 and wrapped in November. Other shows that started shooting after Ironheart were released before it even got a trailer. These included Daredevil Born Again, Agatha All Along, and Echo. Now, there's been a lot of speculation behind these delays. Marvel would sit on Ironheart for nearly 3 years after wrapping production. When they finally released it, it would be in the shadow of the Fantastic Four marketing campaign. It received almost no marketing push, with the first trailer on May 14th, just a little over a month before the show's premiere in June. Even worse, they would release it in 3-episode batches, so the series would be completed in 2 short weeks. That's minimal exposure compared to when they do weekly releases for most other Marvel shows. So what was it that Marvel was so worried about? Well, Marvel at this point was well aware of their failings, and were working hard on a certain other show to course correct. They likely knew long before the release that Ironheart represented everything people were disliking about the current Disney Plus offerings. Like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Ironheart felt like a movie that had been sliced up into 6 episodes, making for an unsatisfying episodic experience. Like She-Hulk, the show had a lead character most people didn't like because she was a snobbish brat who came off as petulant and entitled and constantly whined about how she couldn't get ahead. Like Ms. Marvel, the character required a lot of visual effects to bring to life, so the show requires them to either be outside their suit in the case of Riri, or not using their powers at all in the case of Ms. Marvel. Like Moon Knight, the show failed to tell a self-contained story and ends on what feels like half a character arc. It strands them on a cliffhanger that will likely never be resolved. Like Echo, it's instantly disposable and forgettable. And once again, just like She-Hulk and Secret Invasion, this show also concludes with an unsatisfying Deus Ex Machina. Ironheart meets this random magic girl named Zelma who can literally solve nearly every single problem that she has with magic. And lastly, Ironheart is also full of never-ending plot holes. My favorite being that Riri is witnessed multiple times committing crimes in her supersuit that she built at MIT. There's a scene where a police officer sees her unmasked at one point. How is she not in jail? And if that doesn't get you, how about the central concept that the contracts the Hood is forcing, CEOs to sign under duress? I thought these things would be some sort of demonic contracts from Mephisto, but nope. So why would these CEOs ever obey the terms of these contracts and not just inform the authorities? Nothing in this show makes sense. I could go on really forever. Now it may be this show just got on my bad side because I saw it while sitting in an ICU bed with a pulmonary embolism, but it's not a good sign when the show is adding to my misery rather than detracting from it. In the end, the characters they introduced did not fit the media that they were adapting them into. It did not allow them to be depicted in a comic-accurate manner. They were characters that no one cared about, or they were simply unlikable and we didn't want to spend time around them. All of these are fairly damning qualities, and in many cases made for some pretty mediocre shows. Ironheart was a dead end that led to the end of Marvel Television as we know it on Disney+. But I think there may be another show that better represents the turn from the old style to the new beginning. It could have walked the exact same path as Ironheart, and maybe even shoved it into an open grave to save itself. Yes, I'm talking about suspect number 6, Matt Corman and Chris Ord, Daredevil, Born Again.
Whoa, Dad.
Why didn't you tell me that before we fought?
Why didn't you ask me before immediately trying to whip my ass?
There is no better representation than a failure to move forward than when you are happily dating someone, start to question the relationship, leave it, try to make it work with someone else, realize things are way worse off than they ever were, and then went back to the person you were with before.
You could not live with your own failure. Where did that bring you? Back to me.
And so we've come full circle. The failure of the Disney Plus platform and slate of shows led to the inevitable, the return back to the projects that worked. It seemed at first Feige was completely willing to throw the old Marvel Television to the wolves, let them die with the old brand name that he himself stabbed to death in some poor, cold, dark alley. But that entire corner of the MCU became now upturned. Fans didn't even know if they were canon any longer, especially as Feige began to introduce conflicting elements in his new shows, such as the Darkhold in WandaVision compared to the one in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But then there was a spark of hope. Charlie Cox made his first big screen appearance in Spider-Man No Way Home. Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin was revealed as the main villain of Hawkeye. Could it be? Was the Netflix universe being returned to the fold like a lost lamp? Then Daredevil appeared in She-Hulk, a little less gritty and brooding, a little more jokey than before, but we still welcomed the return.
'Cause now I'm gonna whoop your ass.
My ass remains unwhooped.
Then came the announcement of Daredevil Born Again, as a reimagining.
Really emotional. What an odd feeling to have been in some ways been doing this for a while, and yet we're starting again. We get double the amount of time.
The actors in interviews claimed that this would be a new take on the character, but just with familiar actors, I guess. The plan was to originally only bring back D'Onofrio and Cox as Kingpin and Murdoch. It seems that Feige had not yet shed his hubris. I have a feeling that's soon going to change. He would originally hire Matt Corman and Chris Ord as dual showrunners. Series directors, or whatever they were calling it. They would begin work on an 18-episode series that would be split into 2 releases.
This is very special. It is going to be an 18-episode first season, 18 episodes.
And Feige, just for the record, we call those seasons, all right? It's not an 18-episode season. It's 2 seasons. You split it up. It would be a lighter take on the character, with most episodes being standalone. We can kind of get a sense of what the show would have been like from the only untouched episode from their original version, the bank heist. It was reported that Murdoch wouldn't even suit up as Daredevil until the 6th or 7th episode. It would instead frame itself around being a court procedural with a lighter, more PG-13 tone.
So, this all seems horrible.
And if that all sounds terrible, you aren't the only one who thinks so. Both the 2 main stars, Charlie Cox and D'Onofrio, pled with Feige to change course. They told him that the fans would hate this version compared to what came before.
Between Charlie and I, yes, it was a collective idea, and we were making it known. The initial writers, they had a great idea. Unfortunately, I don't think it would have had a chance because we were disconnecting from the original show. Charlie and I couldn't understand how we're supposed to portray these characters that everybody loves within the environment that they were putting us in, and why they loved them. So we kept on bumping against that the whole time, but that we were going to eventually fail if we didn't right the ship a bit.
And shockingly, Feige listened. I'm not sure what changed his mind, if it was the actors pleading the case or the tepid reception to recent projects. Marvel was starting to get a bad reputation on TV. They were just off a string of shows that were critically lukewarm but commercially reviled. And Daredevil and Kingpin were right in the crosshairs as the next victims. Whatever it was that changed his mind, full credit does have to go to Feige for altering course. Ord and Corman were fired mid-season and replaced with Dario Chardapan. I think that's his name. People get mad at me for pronouncing names wrong, but I think even you guys don't know if I'm doing this one right. He's an actual showrunner, with credits including Jack Ryan, Punisher, and State of Affairs. The series was reduced from 18 episodes in 2 parts into 9 episode seasons. That's just kind of how it works. The entire show was retooled to now fully embrace the original Netflix series and all the events that happened. Every episode except one was extensively reshot and edited. An entirely new first episode was filmed, bringing back in the full cast from the Netflix series, which included Foggy, Karen, Bullseye, and it was all in this killer opener. Then the entire last 2 episodes were reshot. Old plot lines from the Netflix series were brought back in, and even Jon Bernthal agreed to return as the Punisher after refusing to join in the more PG-13 version. They even brought back a revamped theme from the original series. "We were back, baby. Make Marvel Netflix again," apparently became their new motto. And just like that, old Disney Plus Marvel was dead. This was a turning point. This was a complete shift that moved Feige from making low-budget movies segmented out on Disney Plus to real television. Now, did Born Again meet the absurdly high bar of the Netflix series? Of course not. Half of this was retooled material from a failed project, and it often relied on some pretty shoddy CGI. Yet the fact it turned out as good as it did is nothing short of a miracle. The phenomenal cast knocked it out of the park as usual, and it featured some great action set pieces. It may have not been amazing due to the retooling, but it was solid, and it really did have a promise for an encouraging future. All the brand new episodes that they shot completely front to back were the standouts, while embracing the old Netflix properties was met with widespread acclaim. Best of all, it actually felt like a show. It may be the weakest of the Daredevil seasons, but one of the strongest Disney Plus shows. The ending cliffhanger promises a gripping second season free of the usual growing pains. Let's hope so. I am extremely tempted to name Matt Corman and Chris Ord the real killers of these Marvel shows, if not for one little problem. They are small fish and overshadowed by the arrival of Scardapan. If anything, Daredevil Born Again isn't the killer, it's the doctor. It may have helped end the bad production practices within Marvel TV, and it may yet resuscitate this brand on the small screen. Again, we're in a waiting game here. Time will tell. Daredevil Born Again has its season 2 coming up. It will be even further embracing Netflix by bringing back in fan favorite character Jessica Jones. Meanwhile, Punisher will have a short film on Disney Plus before appearing as a major character in the up-and-coming Spider-Man Brand New Day. There's reasons to be optimistic. Let's wait to see if they can stabilize the patient and get Marvel breathing again. In the meantime, we have the real murderers to bring to justice. So let's get to the conclusion here. The real killers.
It's you! It's you!
Yeah. Well, yes, kind of.
How could you, man? How could you?
And so we have our dual suspects, Jeff Loeb and Ike Perlmutter, Bob Chapek and Disney Plus, Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, She-Hulk and Secret Invasion, The Choice of Characters and Ironheart, and lastly, Corman and Ord. But something seems a little off on my investigation board. It doesn't feel quite right. See, I've been pairing these people or subjects together as a team of killers, but this wasn't done by 2 people together. No, this was done by 2 rivals. So let's draw a new line here. This one between Kevin Feige and Ike Perlmutter. This isn't a conspiracy, it's a turf war. Marvel Television and Disney Plus weren't a victim of a murder attempt. Rather, they were caught in the crossfire between 2 gangs, each attempting to outmaneuver the other. let's flash back here. This whole problem began with Ike Perlmutter trying to leverage his own authority on Kevin Feige, blocking projects that he wanted to do while forcing on projects that he didn't want to do. Feige retaliated by going to Bob Iger and changing his relationship to no longer report to Perlmutter. It was a power move, and the first thing he would do would be canceling Perlmutter's pet project, The Inhumans. Perlmutter responded by strengthening his hold on the TV division. He would make a deal with IMAX to help fund Inhumans with Scott Buck as the showrunner. And oh, Scott Buck, oh man, what a resume. You know, crashing and burning Dexter and then making Iron Fist and now Inhumans. How this guy keeps getting jobs, I'll never know. As usual, he created one of the worst shows ever made. More embarrassingly, the first 2 episodes premiered on IMAX, where everyone could see this cheap schlock on the biggest screen possible. It became a black eye for Perlmutter, while Feige rose to prominence in Phase 3 to his greatest success ever. In his hubris, Feige strong-armed the cancellation of some of Marvel's biggest and most well-received shows that were being made outside his supervision. He then worked with Bob Chapek and used the Disney Plus launch to take over the TV division and tried to produce television just like movies, while never really understanding the difference in the media or why it has different methods of production. Meanwhile, Perlmutter would be fully ousted from Marvel and fired by a returned Bob Iger. But don't be counting old Ike out yet. Iger struggled to make Disney Plus profitable, all while it was imploding their entire family-based business model. And Perlmutter, meanwhile, was making political plays behind the scenes for a hostile takeover. Not of Marvel this time, but of Disney entirely. He would position himself in a stockholder meeting where he would begin a proxy battle to win 2 of the board seats for himself and his partner, Nelson Peltz. This would give the 2 of them strong influence over the company's direction. This just created more competition with Iger to deliver, and he passed that off to Kevin Feige. More shows, more characters, and more output. Because of this, Marvel became completely overwhelmed. It could no longer keep up with the quality of the films and shows at the same time. Perlmutter's proxy fight for the board seat would ultimately fail, but the damage to Marvel was already done. The output and quantity had already devalued the brand. The feeling you had to go see every Marvel property was now gone. It would have ramifications far beyond just Disney Plus, as even the theatrical releases started to feel the pain. And even though Perlmutter was dead, not literally, he was removed from Disney and finally exiled far away. He would sell off all his Disney shares shortly after this whole debacle. The results of this gang war between him and Feige, they remained. The old Marvel television was dead, and the new Marvel Entertainment had been ripped apart by the crossfire. How do you come back from all this? How do you heal these old wounds? Well, from learning from the past, old Marvel television is dead. And all those jobs, the producers, the actors, directors, creators, down to the best boy and gaffers and even the PAs, they all lost their jobs in this battle of bruised egos. It will hurt for a long time, but maybe lessons can be learned from this period, as new seeds are planted. As Luke would say,
no one's ever really gone.
Since Agatha All Along released, every new Disney Plus show has premiered under a new banner. Can you guess what it is? Yep. Marvel Television. It's back. There is hope yet for it to survive, to take all the lessons of 70 years in television, producing, writing, and reapply it. Learn what worked from the new stuff like Loki and WandaVision, and learn from also what came before, Daredevil and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. There is time to crawl out of this grave. They haven't started filling it with dirt yet, but there has to be some measure of humility. Only time will tell if people can put aside their egos and heal these old wounds. And that's all I have to say on this one. Let me know down below what you think killed Marvel Television and its shows. Be sure to like and subscribe, and as always, keep those reels turning. Thank you.